Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Morning Sunshine Workshop. I am so excited that you're here and ready to do our floral designing with our beautiful yellows and whites. Before we get started, let's go through everything that you should have ready here in front of you. First things first, you should have the already soaked block of Oasis. If you haven't soaked it yet, go ahead and do that now. It should be nice dark green in color. Then you should have your vase that it came with, either the dolly pot or the white cube. It's the same arrangement in either vase. Just if we have the dolly pot in stock or not, or some people prefer the white vase because it's a little bit sleeker and modern. Today we're going to be making it in the dolly pot. Again, it's the exact same arrangement, made the exact same way. So if you are doing it in the white cube, you're perfectly fine. Then you should have a knife of some kind. Any kind of knife. It doesn't matter how big, how small, will work. You just need it to cut through that block of Oasis. Then you should have shears or scissors of some kind. These are the kind that we use here in Haus. They are super ergonomical and they cut through stems like butter. If you want to be like us and use the tools the pros do for your next workshop, you can add these to your next purchase from our website. Then you should also have your bunch of flowers. Hopefully you've been hydrating them since you received them. And they are all back to health and perkiness from traveling to you. Let's first prep our vase. So we're going to put our flowers to the side. And we're going to take your vase out in front. We're then going to take our block of Oasis. So you can either use it fat and flat or tall and skinny. And this is true either vase you're using. We want it tall and skinny for this purposes. And so we'll take our vase and put it right on top and just give it a small little push just to make an indentation like that. Then we'll put that indentation face up and we're going to cut just inside that indentation. So all the way straight down. This is one of my favorite things. Cutting through the Oasis is like cutting through butter. And it will leak out some water. That's all part of it. If when you're cutting through it, you see some lighter colors in the inside, that means you haven't soaked it all the way. And after we cut it, you'll want to soak it a little bit more so you don't have any air pockets or anything in there. All right. Now that we've got it cut to size, we'll bring our vase back over and we'll plop it in. If you haven't cut it all the way and you can't like wiggle it down well enough, go ahead and pull it out and just shave it down a little bit more until it's nice and snug in there. And you'll see it sticking out a little bit. That's perfect. We need it to be sticking out just a little bit. And it's okay that it's not all the way to the side here. This is actually helpful for when you go to water it. Xander, do you mind grabbing me a few paper towels? Thank you. Oasis makes quite a mess. So there you go. We have our pot all ready to go and prepped. And we'll set that to the side because we'll get to it in just a little bit. Thank you very much. Alrighty. Now let's bring out our bundle of flowers. If you haven't already, go ahead and undo the binding wire on it. And now we're going to separate them out by type. So let's go through what you should have here. You should have, I got a green one in here, 3 yellow tulips, 3 white roses. Ooh, they're tangled. 3 yellow spray roses. 3 white snapdragons. I've got one yellow one in here, but yours should all be white. And then you should have 3 green tricks, and then yellow solidago. And then 1 stem of greenery. And we'll use that if you want to at the very end. So let's go through and clean up our flowers. You'll notice that these do not look fantastic by any means. This is exactly how they came to us from the wholesaler. This is part of the real florist experience on how to clean them up and make them look uber pretty. So let's start with our tulips. You're going to be very careful when you're peeling off these leaves because these stems really like to break. I'll show you. It doesn't take much to break that stem. So when it comes to inserting it into our oasis later, we'll be very careful too. So you're just going to peel the leaves back like this. We don't want to have these little hanging pieces either. So you're just going to peel them all the way down. As you climb up the stem, it's going to get even more and more easy to break it. So just be careful. If you have a leaf that is within 4 inches of your bloom, you can go ahead and leave it. Or if you want it fully clean, that doesn't matter either. But if it's anything lower, it's going to get in the way of us inserting it into the oasis. And so we'll remove it. This guy looks complimentary, so I think I'm going to try and leave him. I might have to remove him later. So go ahead and clean up all 3 stems of your tulips. You'll notice that especially in these lower ones, some residual dirt from the field. That's how incredibly fresh and natural it all is. Tulips, after you're done arranging them, take a notice of where they are in your arrangement in relation to the other flowers, because they continue to grow after you have made your arrangement. So I think they grow 1 inch a day and they'll just really explode. It's really fun to watch. Alrighty. I think I can leave that one too. So now we have 3 really beautiful tulips. You don't have to pull off any guard petals up here. I'll explain that later. Unless any of your petals are broken, just go ahead and leave your tulip head alone. Next, we're going to go to our white roses. This particular variety is the Tibet, typically. You could have Proud or some others in there. And we're going to go ahead and remove the leaves as well, just by putting your thumb next to the main stem and kind of pushing down. You don't want to pull it off by like that, even though that came off cleanly. With other flowers, it could start pulling off things that you don't want it to pull off. So let's just get in a good habit of pulling them off right at the base. And then if you have any thorns, like that guy right there, you can just put your thumb next to it and snap them off, right like that. If that makes you too nervous, then you can also use your clippers. Then now that we have a clean stem, we're going to travel up here and take a look at the back side of our rose. This green here is called the calyx, and that's where the bud formed initially. And it doesn't matter if it's up or down. Some florists like to tell you, oh, it's got a down calyx, so it's old. That doesn't mean anything. As long as it's not damaged, broken, or has a bend in it, then it's fine. I want to show you this one. So you see how this one in particular has a crease in it? That's introducing bacteria into there. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it by using my thumb and index finger and just peeling it cleanly away. All of these others look just fine, so I'm going to leave them. Then coming up here, you're going to see these petals that don't look so hot. They're called guard petals, and that's their job, is to guard the rest of the rose from getting damaged. So we're going to go ahead and remove them now that the rose is safe and in our hands. Just anything that has browning or is creased, we're going to go ahead and remove. And that's really, really tight rose. We want to see his big, beautiful face more than this. So Little trick. We're going to turn him upside down and put him in between our hands and right like this, twirl, and let that centrifugal force open him up. If he's super tight still, which this one is, I'm going to blow rather forcefully in a circular pattern around in the inside of him to get him to open up. You can also wiggle your fingers gently in between the blooms to get him to release a little bit more as well. You'll feel how much the petals are allowing you to give before you start breaking them. You can do this all a bunch of different times and get them to open up really nice. These are all super fresh, though they're not wanting to open up a ton for me. So let me show you, take off those guard petals, how much more we were able to get him open. Go ahead and do that with all 3 of your white roses. If your stem is really long and or crooked, you can trim them just a little bit so you can twirl them more easily. Here you go. Get them all nice and clean. Taking off those guard petals. There we go. All right. Whoopsie. You don't want to drop them, especially on their heads. So now we have 3 beautifully cleaned up white roses. I'm going to put those to the side. Next, we're going to go to our yellow spray roses. This is one of my absolute favorite varieties. It's just so big and beautiful and golden. Go ahead and take off the leaves, all of them, even these little guys up here. And especially up here, that's where taking them off right at the base is important, because you could end up pulling off something that you didn't want to pull off. So now that the leaves are off, go ahead and look at your calyxes. Most of these are going to be just fine. And the same thing with the guard petals. This variety doesn't have a whole lot of guard petals. You might have to remove like 1 or 2 at most. As long as they're not bruised or broken, they're going to be just fine. So go ahead and do that with all 3 of your spray roses. Then once we have them cleaned up, we're going to take a look at them and trim them up. And I'll explain what that means in just a second. If you have any stems on your spray rose that don't have a bloom on the end of it, like the bloom fell off, go ahead and just trim that particular stem off. So I want you to take a look at these 2. They're the exact same variety, but they grew differently. Where these are clustered here at the top, they all come down to a touch point. And then these are longer. They have longer trindles. So this in particular, if I cut him right here and put him in, it's going to be way too big for our pot. So what we're going to end up doing is using these guys as an individual. So anything that's long, has an individual stem longer than 5 inches, you can use as an individual. So these I'm going to use as a cluster. These I'm going to trim right where he connects to the main stem. So it's a very clean cut. There's no hanging piece out here. And then same thing with this. So I can use this guy as an individual. And I'm going to trim them all the way up to the top to where then I have a nice little cluster up here at the top. This one really wanted his guard petals reflexed. That's what that's called. So now I can use this guy as a cluster in the same way I'm using this one. So if you have all of your stems like that, we're going to go ahead and trim them up. This one in particular, you see how these two are lower than my main cluster up here? And they're significantly lower. At least this one is. So I'm going to go ahead and remove him. You can choose to add him and use him as an individual later, but he's really short. But this will be the cluster that I want to use. We want them all relatively around the same height. All right, so those are cleaned up. Next, we're going to go to our green trick, dianthus. Special little note, dianthus is just a fancy word for a carnation. So this is part of the carnation family, even though it doesn't look anything like it. But it has same leaves and same kind of broccoli head if you look at the inside of a carnation. So we're going to go ahead and take off the leaves as normal. Be careful because it does like to break at these knuckle points. The little leaves that are up in here, these aren't going to bother anybody, so we'll leave them. If you have any piece that's broken or damaged, you can go ahead and cut out that little individual broccoli. Or if they're like super huge, like this one, let me show you. And this is huge. And he already has a piece that is kind of hanging down here. So I'm just going to trim him up a little bit. Just by cutting off that little broccoli head. And by huge, I mean more than 3 inches from side to side. We only need about 3 to 4 inches. Go ahead and clean all 3 of those up. These are starting to look like some beautiful flowers in here. That guy, I don't really have a super broccoli piece that I can, even though he's a little bit bigger, I'll go ahead and leave him. But do note how he's shaped because that will determine how we put him in our arrangement. If we put him like long ways or if we use him more sideways, you just want to work with what you've got. Then our snapdragon, we're going to, I'll use my yellow one, go from the bottom bloom. If any of these bottom blooms here are bruised or not looking so hot, you can just go ahead and remove them just by peeling them away. Those were the first ones to bloom, so they're the first ones to go bad. Then you'll take your thumb and index finger at the bottom of the, right below the last bloom, and just gently, not too hard, go all the way down your stem and collect your leaves in your hand. It's one of my more fun things to do. If you have any hanging leaves, like this one didn't strip too well, then you can just peel those off. If you have one that's a little floppier, don't worry. He'll come back when he gets more water and thus turgor pressure. When the water travels up into the cell, it pushes out on the cell wall, making it rigid and thus stand up straight and be tough. And that is called turgor pressure. So when it's droopy, it doesn't have very much turgor pressure, but most of the times they can come back. So you've got a nice little clean stem. I'm going to work with how they're naturally bending, and we'll show that here in a minute. And we're also going to leave this little top because that's clean and natural looking. All right. Then our last piece is the solidago. So I want you to really take a look at this. Obviously, this is way too big and bushy to go in our arrangement like this. So we've got here towards the bottom some really, really long trindles. You might have a few that don't have any blooms on them, and you'll just remove those and discard. They're not useful for us. But we're going to take off these bigger leaves and then use these bottom ones that are longer than 6 inches and use them as individuals. So we're going to, again, cut right at the base all the way up until you don't have any that are longer than 5 to 6 inches. And so what you should have then at the top is a good 4 to 5 inch chunk of blooms that are, it's called our bushy tops. And then we'll just cut a good 4 inches below that last stem and use this guy as an individual. And so you've got one bushy top and a bunch of individuals. These individuals, we're going to go back and clean up all those leaves at the bottom, just like we did our snapdragon, right? Like that. And the reason we do that is for a clean insertion into the oasis. If we try to put leaves down there, it's going to just start tearing apart our oasis more than it needs to. You'll most likely have a whole lot more solidago than you'll need, which is perfectly fine. I usually find myself just adding and adding and adding at the end because it's really transformative. And you'll see what I mean when we start putting it in. Go ahead and do that to your other two stems. If you don't have a whole lot of extra bushiness at the bottom, then what you can do, like for example, this one, I can cut into 2 sections. So I'm going to think about it in that 4-foot top, and I'm going to go down and snip a few inches below that 4-inch bushiness. And then because I don't have any clean stem here to insert, I'm just going to go ahead and remove these bottom couple ones. So I've got at least 1.5 inches of clean stem to insert into the oasis. How many times can I say insert into the oasis today? And then this one I can use as an individual as well. So I ended up getting 2 bushy tops out of this particular stem. And then I'll be able to do the same thing with this one. There we go. Take off the ones that don't have any blooms and the bigger, bushier leaves. Perfect. All righty. So now I have 3 bushy tops and a whole lot of individuals at least that are all nice and clean. So we are now ready to design. And I like doing all this cleaning beforehand, so when we do get to designing, we don't have to stop our creative juices and clean something. We can just create. So go ahead and bring your vase in front of you. There's no right or wrong way that you have it facing, but we are going to think of our arrangement in sections. So we're going to have a front section, a middle section, and a back section. So we're going to start with our snapdragons. Okay. Remember, I've got one yellow one. You should all have whites. And so I really want you to take a look at your inspiration picture on what we're creating, so you have a good idea. And we're going to have, he's really droopy, so I'm probably going to use him as my really, my lower part, unfortunately. I'm going to use him down here. And then these two, I'm going to use, my top broke on this one, so it's not a huge deal. If it does break, you can still use them. I'm going to have them at a pretty good angle here and a little bit less angle here. And then my floppier one, the one that's really got some angle to it, I'm going to use here. So our first one, the way we measure, my stem is too long to show you. We want at a good 45-degree angle, and the blooms will go all the way down to the bottom of your oasis here. So if I'm envisioning it and holding that last bloom here at the top of my oasis, then I travel a good 2 inches down. This is going to be my cut point now. And when we cut, we're going to cut at a good really steep angle, nice and sharp. And the reason for that is it now acts like a knife going into your oasis versus flat, just crushing through it. And it opens up more surface area on your stem to absorb as much water as possible. So now kind of on the side of this sticking up oasis, right in the very center of the plane, right here, we're going to go ahead and insert it. Use your fingers as close to the oasis as possible and just kind of thread it in there until that bloom hits the oasis. If you don't like where you put your flower and you need to move it, you need to take it completely out and make a new hole, because now the oasis is not, if you just kind of pull it out a little bit, then the oasis doesn't have direct contact with that stem, and it doesn't therefore have a water source and will die. So my next one, I'm going to do a little bit more up and down, but with just a slight angle. So maybe a 5 to 10 degree angle. And we're going to do this one right behind your first one. Okay, so it's going to go like this. Get my cut point. And so if this is my middle section here, I'm going to go right behind it, because in this case, if I go right on top of it, I'm going to hit that other stem inside the oasis, and it's going to be a problem. I'm going to go just right behind it, about an inch in. And this one I am doing on the top, actually a ½ inch in. And then this one, I'm kind of completing that height here. Okay. So I'm going to move it over just a hair, because I do want a little separation here, because we'll be putting our tulips there. So now we're going to work on our snapdragon over here. See, I put him in a little bit too far. There we go. There. That's better. Okay. So I've got a really, really long piece of snapdragon here. So unfortunately, if I do this, that's not going to look appropriate in my arrangement. So I want about the same height of blooms I have over here to be on this one. So I'm going to take off these excessive blooms, unfortunately, and discard them. So I'm going to have about this many, because we want everything to be nice and proportional. And so I'm going to measure about 2 inches in. And then I'm going to insert this one at a 90 degree angle. So just straight over. And again, this is why we had the oasis sticking up out of our arrangement. So right in that middle section, straight into the side, I'm going to put it all the way in. So if you can't insert it all the way from where you've got it cut, then you go ahead and make a new cut, slightly shorter, and try again in a new hole. There you go. So nice 45 degree angle. There we go. And you always want your snapdragons or whatever flower you're using, when they're angled, we want them angling up, because if they're angled down, I'll show you like my tulip. If it's angled down in your arrangement, it gives the illusion that it's already going bad, that it's dying, that's droopy, versus when we have it pointing up, it's like it's healthy and full of trigger pressure and going towards the sky like a flower should. So it's just a little psychological game you're playing when you're doing flower design. So actually our tulips are our next item. And again, we're going to look at how they're curving. So I've got 2 that are curving pretty good, and then one that's a little bit more straight. So I'm going to take my most curvy and I'm going to use it down here. And then my medium curvy and my straight over here. I'm going to show you. So we're going to end up putting these 2 tulips in between our snapdragons, staggered as well, like this. Okay, so one will go in front and one will go in back. So my most curvy one, I'm going to have it a little bit more angle. Right there along with my snapdragon. And this one we want to be a little bit shorter than our Snapdragon. So now I want to show you. I left this leaf on hoping I could save him, but I can't get him into the oasis any farther than that stem. And I really do want him to be a little bit shorter. So unfortunately, I can't keep that leaf. So I'm going to take him back out, take that leaf off. Give him a new little cut and in a new hole. Be careful when you're inserting your tulips, again, because they do like to break. So thread it in right there next to the oasis. So there we go. I've got them slightly shorter than my Snapdragons. My next one is going to be a little bit taller, just a hair taller than that. And we really don't want them super taller than our Snapdragon. So I'm going to measure. I want them about right there. Measure down, and that's my cut point. Now this one I'm going to go on the back side next to that other more up and down one. And this will go at a slightly less angle. There we go, but still taller than our first tulip. Okay, right like that. Then our next one is going to go down here and accent our Snapdragon down here. So it's up to you if you want him in front of or behind your Snapdragon. He's just accentuating this line of high and low. And at a similar angle, you will insert him there. Hopefully you have a curvier one than I do. And it could go like that. Yay! All right. And the reason why we do these this way is so if we had all the other stuff in here and was trying to do this from the side, all we'd be doing is hitting other stems. So it's better to get the things that are temperamental, meaning they could break easily first, and the ones that have to have steep angles in first as well. So now we're going to go from biggest to smallest. So we're going to start with our green trick. I didn't clean this one up. And what we're going to do is, again, think of it as front, middle, and back. And so we're going to end up with the first one here, right underneath the cluster of our tallest ones. This one's going to be really short, and the bloom is going to go all the way down to the oasis and kind of cover our lip right here. So I'm only cutting about a 2 to 3 inch stem and pushing it all the way down to the base of the oasis. Again, so he's covering up the lip there. We want to make sure all of our oasis is covered by the end. We call it hiding the magic. So then my next one, I'm going to have right here in the middle over here. And you can choose to either have it nestled. I'm going to have it nestled right up here against my Snapdragon. And this one's just a little bit longer. So I've got about a 4 inch stem. And this is really connecting the bridge between our two Snapdragon and tulip areas. So I'm nestling him right up there next to my Snapdragon. Find a good hole for him. But I do want him indeed lower than our Snapdragons, but taller than our first one. Then if you turn your arrangement around, our last one, and I'm going to indeed trim him because he's way big. All right, it's going to be short, just like the first one was, but down here near our lower tulip and Snapdragon section. And so this is the guy that had a funky shape to him. So because of where I'm putting him, I want him a little bit longer and lower and covering this area. I'm going to use him flat and fat, just like our oasis was. And again, push them all the way down to where they connect to the vase. So now if you look at the top, you've got this like line of green trick. I just poured water out of my vase. That's okay. We're going to re-water them when we're done with our arrangement. All right, so back to the front. Next, we're going to do our next biggest flower, which is our rose. And we're going to do these basically opposite of where our roses are. So a good 2 to 3 inch cut. And we're going to put it over here next to our long low, again, opposite of our snap or our green trick. And he is also going to go all the way to the base of our vase. So he's covering that. So there should be some separation right here between two flowers. Your next one, you're going to put right here, finishing that connection, hopefully between that bridge between your two tulip and snapdragon locations. This one again has a 4-inch cut. And you're just going to nestle it there in between. So again, it should be shorter than your snapdragons, but nice there in line with your green trick and taller than your first one. So that's what your front should still look like. Then you'll turn it around. And same thing on the back side, you'll do your last rose, a good 2 to 3 inch cut, opposite of your green trick. So it should be at the base of your talls. Right like that. Again, good separation area between your green trick and your white rose. Then we're going to take, and I know this sounds really weird, but we're going to fill in our holes first before we add in our yellow spray roses. And the reason for that is we want this just to be the filler flower that it is. And if we put this in last, it has a chance of overshadowing our spray roses. And we really want these roses to kind of sit on top of them. But we want all of our magic to be covered, our oasis. So I'm going to take my 3 fluffy tops and fill those in on the biggest holes and then fill in from there with my individuals. So for example, my fluffiest top is this guy. And again, we want these in nice and low in our arrangement. Don't put it in like this. Now that is what I see versus the roses and all the other things. So we want them nestled in nice and low. Don't have them sticking out any more than the other flowers are. So for example, the solidago will go right in there, nice and low like that. Now still a little bit down here that I can cover, and you don't have to have it completely covered because you do have your spray roses that you'll still use. But we do want a good, nice little section covering it up. So right there in that big middle section. Now that's still sticking out a little bit too much in my opinion. So I'm going to actually just trim his little top. There we go. No, he's not sticking out too much. See, he's nice and flush in there. Again, we don't want it sticking out like that. That's distracting. We don't want that. So go ahead and fill in your holes. So after you've got your clusters in, then you can use your individuals and like really stack them in there. You can even take several together and make your own little cluster and even cut them together. And then you insert them all together at one time. There we go. The team is hard at work in the back, working on wedding stuff and retail things. You might hear them chattering back there. There we go. And then you can use your like longer pieces to kind of thread in here between your snapdragon and tulips. Add some texture there. As you just start adding, you're just like, oh, I love. You can even put some even lower in here to really accentuate that. That's too long, gotta cut them shorter. Get your fluffiness all the way down there, all the way down here. And you don't feel like you have to use all of your solidago right now. You can always go in later and fill in more. Perfect. All right. Now that we've got our holes mostly filled, we're going to go ahead and put our yellow spray roses basically right on top of those 3 fluffy clusters that we had. So I'm going to take this first cluster, and honestly, he's probably too long. So right below, about an inch or 2 below the last connection point of your blooms, go ahead and make a cut. And so I've got my big fluffy section right here of Solidago. I'm just going to find him a home right inside there, in between our green trick and white spray roses. I'm sorry, white regular roses. So right there like that. Then if you ended up only having 2 clusters, like I did, I've got 2 clusters and a lot of little ones. I'm going to put my other main cluster right here. My tummy's grumbling. Maybe I need some coffee. So right here like this. Be careful when you're inserting so you don't break any of the individuals. There we go. I mean, look at how transformative that is. And then I'm going to take my individuals and give them a home in my middle plane. So in between here, might be too long. I'm going to find him a home right there. And usually flowers in the wild grow in clusters. So I'm going to put at least 2 spray roses together if I'm doing individuals. So I'll show you what I did there. So I put those 2 together to mimic nature a little bit more. And then any little individuals you still have left, if you have a hole that you might need to cover, you can fill it in. Like right there, looked really good for that one. Let's see, I could put this one right here. Perfect. And yes, I still have one I can put right there. If you want to, you can use your greenery in the same way we used our Solidago and cutting off little pieces and fill in greenery down here if you like more greenery natural look. Now any remaining hole that you might have, go ahead and finish filling in with your Solidago. Hi, how are you? Come on in, the girls will be right with you. All right. So again, if you see any oasis down here that you might need to cover, go ahead and cover it with your Solidago. We want all that magic covered. Perfect. And then that is your arrangement. Your morning sunshine. Remember to water it, and the way you do that is you kind of just make a little hole with your fingers and pour your water directly over until it overflows. So do it in your sink. Remember, if you have a water softener in your home or office, don't use water from that unless you're using the water conditioning water packet that we gave you. Otherwise, if you don't have either of those, then use water from your hose. Because you can't see the water line, be sure to water it at least every other day, if not every day. And then the last thing is be sure to tag us when you post pictures on Instagram and share your creation. We love to see your smiling, beautiful faces. Thank you guys. I hope you had a good time, and be sure to check out our other live workshops that are on our website at any given time. Thank you and have a good night.